Welcome to Retro Fanfic Retrospective, the podcast where we dredge up old fanfiction and expose it to the cold, harsh light of 2020. My name is Amado, and with me are...
Tori.
And Dom, the Palabarbarian.
Palabarbarian?
Yeah, it's a barbarian full plate that has holes. It's an expansion material. I'll get you the booklet. So then you'll have to let me run that character.
Well, you're a human, so you have to have done one and then switched over to the other, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I'm actually a subtype of human from a different expansion book. I'll get you that book also.
Personally, I'm a dire dog. That is both my race and class.
Mm-hmm.
And also state of being, just very dire.
Yeah, dire state of being, very dog.
What's my class? What class would I be given if I was sucked into a magical world through a, amusement park ride?
I remember running one game at one point which you played an alchemist just for fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was that introductory adventure for 3rd edition that I kind of actually liked.
Yeah.
Like where there were mines and a plague and something.
Yeah.
And I definitely rolled up a commoner because at first off it hardly matters.
Yeah.
And the commoner was an alchemist, and I threw vials of stuff that I had stocked. And what I remember most about that game is in the first encounter where, like, you break into a room and there's a bunch of kobolds and they, like, immediately overturn a table and, stick their crossbows out and, try to barricade it a little bit. Mm-hmm. One of our friends' characters, one of our friends had this monk or something jump over their barricade table behind their enemy lines. All the kobolds turned and shot him full of crossbow bolts and he died.
And they were surprised because they were also used to power gaming from the get-go.
That's the first level D&D experience, though.
Yeah. They seemed surprised and put off, and I was confused.
I'm not sure how... I mean, I think at that situation, you just kind of, like, threaten/parlay with the kobolds, right?
Well, you don't charge in the middle of them.
Depends on who you are, I suppose.
So why are we talking about Dungeons and/or Dragons today, Amado?
Well... there's this person.
Yes, my favorite RPG, Dungeons or Dragons. I personally choose the dungeon.
I prefer the dungeon, too. Dragons just aren't that interesting. Like, they're fine.
Oh, no, I feel the opposite. I feel dragons are infinitely interesting, but infinitely more likely to kill me.
Oh, so. I suppose that's
also,
fair.
you could, in theory, negotiate with the dragon, not with the dungeon.
Mm.
That's sometimes true. If it's a cool enough dungeon, then it's probably sentient.
You've both given me a lot to think about this day.
The point is, I was thinking about astolat, like you do. If that's how you say their name, I actually have no idea. That is an alias of a big name fan in, fan fiction community. Mm-hmm. Have you heard that term, big name fan?
No.
Okay, well now you have.
A fan with a big name?
Yeah, well, astolat's not that big a name. It's kind of a small name. Anyway, this is one of those people who is very active in fandom and has been since apparently 1994 through various fandoms. And they're also one of the, or if not the main person behind the creation of Archive of Our Own and the Organization for Transformative Works, Association for Transformative Works, what's it called? The organization behind Archive of Our Own and some other stuff. Mm-hmm. Organization for Transformative Works. Mm-hmm. And so, like, their internet post in response to fanfiction.net deciding to, like, arbitrarily purge some content, was titled, "We Need an Archive of Our Own."
Oh.
And, like, they were very much behind that whole effort. And I was like, oh, let's read something by astolat. But, they've gone through various fandoms. And so looking at their fanfiction page, they still host everything, on them. Things before 2005, which is more or less my arbitrary cutoff date, is a bunch of stuff that I just don't really know anything about. So Tombstone, like, what's Tombstone? Who knows? Who knows it all? There's a Jeeves and Wooster fanfic, but it's very short. And, Jeeves is awesome. But a bunch of other things, Stargate SG-1, I just don't know it. LA Confidential, I don't know. Gladiator, Justice League, but that one's super, super short. So something that's a decent length, what I ended up hitting on was the one based on the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. Well, 2. There's one other one.
Are you familiar with the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon?
I'm familiar with it because back in college, they came out with the really cool DVD box set of it. The one that came with the little booklet that looked like a 3rd edition book with stats for all the characters and items in,
Wow.
3rd edition D20 rules.
Was that one that had the radio play of the unwritten last episode?
That might have been the one. I think they've had a future DVD release since then that also had it or something. But anyway, that means that someone who I was house sharing with, like one of the people in my extremely geeky house senior year of college, got that as like a birthday present and, put on some episodes over the course of however long. And so I saw some episodes, enough to familiarize myself more or less with the cartoon. And also the stats, and Uni the Unicorn is CR2, so, can throw them at your party and they can take out Uni without too much trouble.
Right.
Right.
CR2, that's nothing.
I don't remember if they statted out Tiamat or if they were just like refer to the monster manual, which would have been hilarious because the 3rd edition Tiamat has like spell-like powers all over the place, and D&D cartoon Tiamat just kind of runs around being a big like Rory thing. Not like a super intelligent, like high-level mage, god thing.
Right.
Right. In the cartoon, in this fan fiction, there's a little bit of difference there. Actually, it's about the same.
Not nearly enough Tiamat content in this fanfic for my liking.
It's just at the end.
But anyway, when I saw that, I was like, yes, I do want to read a fanfic based on the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. I've also read one of the Choose Your Own Adventure books based on the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon.
And that would be not fan fiction.
No, because it was licensed.
It's licensed.
But it was apparently the first, as far as anyone can tell, English language Choose Your Own Adventure book featuring a woman of color as the main protagonist. Because I read the Diana one.
Oh.
It was not good. It was kind of crappy.
Yeah,
I'm sure they all were.
I don't recall much of the characters from this cartoon because I've only seen a few episodes very long ago. But from this fan fiction, we don't get that much from Diana.
No, you never got much from Diana.
Yeah, that's kind of what my impression is. What was the original, the release date for the cartoon itself?
That's a good question.
It was 80s. I looked it up.
Is it 80s cartoon?
Yeah. I looked it up on Wikipedia at one point. It was like 83, 85.
I mean, I think the backstory is that Gary Gygax kind of left being super active at TSR as much and went to Hollywood trying to like leverage D&D into a multimedia empire.
Sure.
83 to 85, apparently. And all that came of it was this, selling the rights to a D&D movie, which would eventually resurface in, as the Dungeons & Dragons movie.
Dungeons & Dragons movie, I forgot about that.
The rights passed around for like 15 years or something.
In the theater, and I loved it.
No.
Oh, no, it's so bad.
Tori.
I know. I loved it. Don't even get me started. I haven't seen it since it came out when I was like 13 or 14.
That helps. That probably helps your experience.
I'm like, every life is a journey, and like you're different people, different points of your life. You can't really fault somebody for thinking something that they did.
No, it was
Tori. No,
it was terrible, and I loved it.
Okay, that's fair.
Did you know it was terrible at the time?
Totally.
Okay, that's
fair.
okay with that. Yeah.
Well, in that case, I can get behind
it made
just
me happy.
Totally loving those blue lips on Dalamar or whatever his name is.
Damadar.
Damadar.
So silly. Like, there was something about it. Like, I will say it's not completely an ironic hipster love or something. It was partially that like this is so silly you have to be amused, but it was also like it scratched an itch somewhere through my like. I don't know. I don't remember when that came out. It must have been like in between like 11 and 14.
Was your itch for Star Wars but fantasy?
Yeah.
Because that's...
Exactly that. That is such a
bad?
good way to put it. Yeah.
Was your itch medium-sized dwarves?
I mean, but to be fair, like Star Wars, when you think about like the original Star Wars movies, like those were so affecting to us, but that like so much of the dialogue is so ridiculous.
It's better than the dialogue in the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Of course it is. I mean, you know what I mean, though.
I know what you mean. It
was fun.
I think I had Galen call me Damadar for a while.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like something that happened.
Yeah.
It sounds like something that happened recently.
So, the cartoon is 83 to 85, so before I was born, before any of us were born.
And this fanfiction was out 98?
99, it's 98 on the Archive of Our Own copy and 99 on the author's personal website, so something like that.
Okay.
And
so this is well after the cartoon was over.
Yes. Oh, well after.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what the background is with the author's, experience with the cartoon. But I guess none of us actually have an emotional attachment to the cartoon, huh?
I hardly remember it.
They tried to replay it at some point when I was growing up, like they had a Foxbox thing or something where they tried to play it again and they showed like the first episode and I watched it and I was bored.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the episodes are like good for 80s cartoon. It's just
Yeah.
I don't watch 80s cartoons for fun.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
80s cartoons I like. There's a couple I like the early Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and like She-Ra were like actually like pretty enjoyable to watch.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles wasn't an
90s.
80s cartoon in the same way that like Transformers and He-Man and this were 80s cartoons.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it was in that it was tied into a toy line and selling the toy line.
Wait, wasn't TMNT 90s,
Well,
not 80s?
TNMT, was
the
it?
first
It was
cartoon
late
may have
80s.
Or the first cartoons I'm just
Yeah.
The first cartoon may have been early 90s. I think you might be right, Dom. But yeah, like She-Ra, like there's a lot of things that came out where it was like when you watch them again, you recognize how corny they are and the animation can be really stilted, but you see the seeds of like really promising ideas and plots, and that kind of elevates your opinion of it. You just like see like, well, that was actually really clever and kind of unexpected for something that came out in this time.
Yeah. Well, I'm
As far
sure
as the
that-
D&D cartoon is concerned, I don't remember it well enough, but I don't think it had a lot of that.
I expect the author must have experienced some of that. I mean, to want to write about it. And I think maybe
Perhaps,
elicit
yeah.
1 or 2 fanfics during the Yuletide event from other people for the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. Anyway, so Dungeons & Dragons cartoon, for those of you who are not familiar with it, there's 6 teenagers with no attitude. Well, no, actually, more attitude, because Eric has attitude.
Yeah.
So, like, that's way more attitude on average than your Power Rangers.
That's what I picked up from the fanfic was Eric was the one with attitude.
That's correct. He might be cool and rude.
Could be.
Yeah.
He seemed to be the one the author focused on the most.
The point is, they go on an amusement park ride called Dungeons & Dragons, get sucked into another world, and and they get given magic weapons and the names of a class. It's like, Bobby, you're a barbarian, but all that means is you have this club that produces earthquakes. It's not like you're going to gain class levels or anything. And there's this all-powerful gnome thing called Dungeon Master that usually tells them what they need to be doing, which is usually like they have a lead for a way home. And for some reason or another, it doesn't work out. I do appreciate the cartoon. It wasn't always like, oh, the portal was destroyed. Sometimes it was like, it doesn't work out for some other reason.
Sure.
But it never works out. And then there's also this evil wizard named Wizard. I guess, he's a wizard. He's a wizard with like a horn named Venger, who's after their magic weapons, because apparently they're super, super good magic items. Some of them are, I guess, but like, I don't know. They seem to be more important than they seem to be just from what they can do based on their own.
They do something with Tiamat or stop
And
them from
Tiamat
Tiamatting
shows up
something.
occasionally and hates Venger, but also maybe everybody else.
Right.
So, and Tiamat doesn't talk, which is a missed opportunity, because like,
Wait, stop a second.
Yeah.
Is it Venger?
Venger.
I was saying Venger in my head.
Same. I was just about to
It's
say
got to be
that.
like vengeance, right? It's Venger.
Not
I-
like vengeance?
I
No,
don't know.
that's-
I mean, we're gonna have to go back and watch the cartoon and see what they say. I
I'm a
thought it
little
was
disappointed that
Venger,
none of us
but
did.
I almost did. But
Well, we'll
this
never
was
know.
enough.
And no one else knows.
It's unknowable. Anyway, that's the premise. And it was kind of I don't think it was a big success at what they wanted to be, because it didn't have an associated toy line that was any good. And they didn't really like tie it into drawing people into playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like they didn't release any like modules that tied in, or like any kind of, gateways into actually being a D&D player.
Well, like if you wanted to play the acrobat, what would you do?
You would pick up your player's handbook, first edition, AD&D, and be a thief acrobat, which was a class in the player's handbook.
Besides thief?
Yep, thief and thief acrobat.
Not just acrobat.
Thief acrobat.
Acrobatic thief,
Acrobatic thief.
to
Yep.
put it more precisely.
Yeah,
No,
this sounds like the Thaco generation, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was Gary Gygax's, pure hand at the wheel, which is why you have, 50 pole arms and all that kind of thing.
Right? Yeah, that. I'm glad you pointed that out, because that's always distressed me.
You
It's
played.
like, why?
We
Why?
played second edition, where there was no more thief acrobat or cavalier or barbarian.
I appreciate second edition. I feel like there's a lot you can get out of second edition and you don't necessarily get in later editions. To be honest, I mean, but first edition is frustrating as heck to me.
We do have experience with Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah, right. Not so much the cartoon, but we played a lot of D&D between all of us.
I'm not sure that counts in this discussion.
It
Yeah,
doesn't,
maybe-
because the cartoon has nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons.
That's actually a really
Yeah.
good point. We probably shouldn't focus too heavily on actual D&D if we want to really dive into this fan fiction of this cartoon that I don't really remember. Do you remember this cartoon, Amado?
Yes, I said. I watched it in college.
I
Not
know.
all of it, but some of it.
I watched a lot of things in college I don't remember.
This fanfic. It's called Trial by Existence. It's divided into multiple parts. Also a book 1 and a book 2, which I didn't really notice because I was reading the archive of our own copy, even though I pointed to the copy on the author's website, which divides it into 2 books.
Is the book 2 finished? Because it looked like it
Yes.
has 3 chapters.
It has 3 chapters, but that's all of it.
But it's definitely finished
It's super
because of the way
finished.
it ends.
Oh.
Now, there's a content warning that I didn't do enough research to warn you about beforehand. There's rated R and PG-13 versions of a couple chapters. And Tori, you read the PG-13 versions.
I did.
Dom and I read the rated R versions, which,
Yeah.
if we'd had the choice, we probably would have read the PG-13 versions.
The way it's a warning, and then the way it's listed is there's the chapter with nothing after it, and then after that there's the same chapter title but in red letters rated R. So like I actually was confused by it because I didn't read the note very closely. I read the chapter and then I started to read the next chapter thinking it was maybe an addition, and then went like, oh, this is the same. So upon realizing that, I was like, based on the content of that first chapter, I was like, I don't think I need to see any more. You know, I get the idea.
You know, we'll get into, that stuff later. I just like to throw out, as usual, the author, Astolat, wrote this, more than 20 years ago. And as usual, I'm sure they would write it differently if they were writing it in the cold, harsh light of 2020.
Yeah.
But in
I
any
mean,
case,
I'd
I'd like to jump in to the first couple stories, which kind of start one of the 2 main plot threads in this. Those first 2 stories are called The Road Less Traveled and Miles to Go. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciated where this starts from, where it's someone writing fan fiction about a kid's cartoon, right?
Yeah.
And they really keep a lot of the flavor of the kid's cartoon while also pushing it into more mature content. Like, so this is about, they're going to like a shrine, like some temple that's supposed to have the power to send them home. And,
Right.
there's a fight, and the details are not super important. The important part is it is Eric character development. Mm-hmm. And Eric was the one in the show who was most likely to be unhappy with the way things were going.
It's like, I haven't seen the show, but I know the character type perfectly.
Right. He's the one who would complain.
Just says something snarky, and then
Exactly.
goes something else.
And he also doubled in the show as being the one who is likely to not go with the decision of the group. Mm-hmm. And people always complain about how he's always, always wrong. Mm-hmm. And so, like, the message of the cartoon is like, you should bow to the groupthink.
Fuck you, Eric.
And he's also supposed to be, like, cowardly, even though, push comes to shove.
That was kind of the weird part about this, is like his whole cowardly attitude. But
Well,
yeah,
that's
let's
not
go
weird.
into
Like,
this.
it's trying to work with that. Because
Yeah.
what happens is in a fight, like, Bobby's out exposed in, like, an attack by Venger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, everyone's like, someone needs to go out and save him. And, Eric's like, no, that's dumb, because Bobby ran out to save Uni, right, the unicorn. And it's like, no, that's a bad idea, because there's literally a wizard, like, flying up there, shooting lightning bolts. And so Eric's gut instinct is like, no, that was his dumb idea, and I'm not also running out into the lightning bolts.
Yeah.
Yeah, which basically results in Bobby's the kid
It
getting
results
hurt.
in Hank getting hurt.
Or Hank.
Because
Okay.
Hank, the ranger, the leader,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
runs out and, shields Bobby, even though he's not the one with the magic impenetrable shield.
That's blonde,
Eric.
That's the blonde-haired kid, right?
Yeah, the blonde-haired kid. He's the blonde, like,
Blonde,
stand-up,
blue-eyed,
boring
Yeah.
Moral,
guy.
virtuous.
Yeah. No, you know all the characters, even if you haven't seen the cartoon.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I just keep getting their names mixed up, to be honest. Bobby, Hank, and Eric
Just
are
a
like,
bunch of white
they're really
boy
confusing in my
names,
brain.
yeah.
Well, it's the ranger, the cavalier, and the barbarian. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I still just, which one's the little kid?
The barbarian,
Barbarian.
Bobby.
That's what I thought. Okay, Bobby is the kid and the barbarian.
Yes.
Got it.
He's both a kid and a barbarian.
I remembered him being a
Dual
kid and a
classic.
barbarian, which
There
is
you
kind
go.
of crazy, but I had to make sure the name was correct.
He doesn't get his kid powers back, though, until he reaches a certain level of barbarian.
Right. It has to pass the kid level.
That's
Yeah.
right. What was I saying? Anyway, it starts off...
Hank gets hurt.
Yeah, Hank gets hurt. And this provides an impetus for Eric to do a lot of soul searching, because he's like, even though that was even more dangerous for Eric than it would have been for me. Sorry, even though it was, now I'm doing it. Even though that was more dangerous for Hank than it would have been even for me, he didn't hesitate. He did that as the right thing to do. And, also he's like, oh, and that also means that Hank was hurt and like on the verge of death because of me.
Yeah, so they have this nice moment where they take Hank to a local...
well, it's the temple that they were going to use to get back home.
Yeah, a temple to the High Lord, which is the vague deity.
The High Lord is like, who the clerics pray to or whatever.
Yeah.
So while Hank's recovering and being healed, Eric does a lot of soul-searching and... Well, not really soul-searching, like self-hating, really.
Right, yeah.
And working it out and trying to figure out, do I really want to be this negative person? Do I want to help my friends or watch my friends die?
Yeah.
And I like he turns a corner there, and I like that they kind of keep the pragmatic aspect of his character a lot.
Because society puts a lot of naysaying on like being pessimistic, like bringing up negative things that could happen, but that is a practical problem-solving way of looking at things in order to not die a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And there's two other things I really like about this plot, like in this first chapter especially, which is that, like I said, the bridging the cartoon source material to the like more mature, I want to actually tell a story with these characters thing.
Yeah.
Hank is hurt by like a magic firebolt, and he's just like vaguely very, very hurt. And I was like, yes, that's exactly how it would be. It's not like, oh, the flesh of his skull was seared off, or like, it's just like, no, he's near death because he's very hurt. His hit points are low.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, they have to use the stored power from the temple to heal him, so they can't go back home. And I was just like, yes, that's exactly how it goes.
I was okay with that.
That is exactly how it goes in this universe,
Yeah.
And it's a good reason. It hangs together. It's just like, oh, and by the way, that portal that did exist and could have taken you back home can't for reasons.
For good reasons.
For good reasons.
Yeah.
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 Arbitrary
Very
but good reasons.
Right.
But yeah, these first I don't remember if this is in the first or
It's the
second
first two
chapter,
chapters. It's
but
like this
it's
kind of
Eric's soul searching and like all that. It's kind of funny because like you have this thing with Eric where he's like, I'm such a coward, and he goes and he talks to a priest about that, and the priest is like, yep, you are.
It's like, I'm not going to condone, the bad
Exactly,
behavior. It's
yeah.
like, if you're looking for me to say, like, no, you're fine. It's like, no, that's shitty of you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and it was.
but the priest is also like inspiring and gives some good advice.
But
Well, I mean, the good advice is basically saying like you acknowledge the way in which you fucked up. You can do better next time.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of instantly get this like adult perspective on the medium because like I haven't seen the show in a long time, as I mentioned, but like I would imagine that Eric in the source is maybe just like comically cowardly,
Yes.
like
And comically an asshole.
right, and that's supposed to be a source of humor.
Yeah.
But if you took this from a realistic lens, you'd be like, no, like this person needs to change, or their life is going to go down a really shitty path, and that's what the intervention of the priest does. And I actually feel kind of satisfied from that, like seeing this character have the opportunity to change is, I guess, just because having a character being comically shitty is actually like just terrible to me. It's like it's not funny.
Yeah,
like people should be able to grow and change and become better. It's not funny for them to just be assholes.
yeah, Eric reflected on how it was bad for themselves to keep doing this. How every time it wore them down, and and since it was a habit, it would come out involuntarily, and that would make things worse over time.
Yeah, it's like the author really thought about like this character is a real person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I enjoyed these first two parts. The melancholy tone was really, I don't want to say fun, but it was fun for me. I enjoyed it.
yeah.
It's
was good.
satisfying.
Satisfying,
And
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
The second chapter is basically like after Hank has recovered, it's a chance for like Eric and Hank to kind of talk this stuff over. I mean, other stuff happens as well. They save a baron from orcs, and as usual. There's this whole plot in this village where like this baron has been betrayed, and like stuff is going on.
It's very D&D side quest.
It's very D&D. Right, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're passing through this town where all these different things just happen to be set up that could use the intervention of like a group of heavily armed, wanderers who have nothing better to do.
And this character with this ability wanders by and notices something wrong, and then...
Yeah, and is that just foreshadowing the ability that like...
I think that was. They didn't really explicitly state it later, but Eric was able to sniff out something evil.
Some like dark magic that was placed there,
Physically made him ill
Yeah.
to be around. and nobody else noticed.
Well, I mean, there's the distinct lack of a cleric in this group's party, so, you know.
Definitely. You need a healer.
Right.
A druid, at least, maybe.
I mean, doubling up on the thieves was not the wisest option.
Although it does sound like a realistic party.
I want to be a thief. I want to be a thief acrobat.
Are you sure you want to be a healer or a cleric? No two thieves?
Cleric of the god of thieves? Can we sell you on that?
Cleric of the god of acrobatic thieves.
By the way, the magic items, there's like the bow that shoots, you know, energy arrows. Pretty cool. There's the shield that produces force fields and is like impenetrable. That's also pretty cool.
Yeah.
I feel like the cloak of invisibility sounds really plain, but in D&D, invisibility and will items are just like the biggest headache for a DM. Second only to like fly at will.
That's
items.
actually a really good point.
Yeah.
The club makes earthquakes. The hat is a Deus Ex Machina thing. Like, he can pull stuff out of the hat sometimes, presto. He's not great.
Yeah.
And I feel like...
Is his name really Presto?
It was Preston, I think.
Just
his parents named him Presto.
I mean, I just feel like he must be really into being... Is he a mage?
Yeah, he's supposed to be.
He must be really into being a mage, because he's just like, I'm Presto. I'm such a mage right now. Look at me. I'm maging.
But by maging
spells, he just has the item, but that's all of them.
By
right?
maging, he's just taking off their hat and pulling stuff out.
Yeah, well, then he's just a magician.
Usually they just rely on their items, right? Except, I mean, you know, like Diana's athletic, and she uses her, like, pole. She's got a Monkey King's pole, which, like, I want to say is not that cool, but, like... The Monkey King is cool, and therefore her pole is cool.
Absolutely, sounds
and she's cool.
And used right, that item's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So they don't actually, like, in their class distinction, do they have any powers or just
Presto
items?
cannot cast spells.
What?
Nope, he just has the hat. Sheila is not particularly, like, lockpicking or anything. She just has the cloak. Bobby does not go into a berserker rage. I don't know what barbarians even did.
Well,
in first edition.
They were basically like, they got bonuses to strength, and they had some, like, you know, cultural
He's got the club.
Yeah, I don't think there was any berserking in, like, first edition, but
which
nonetheless,
is why,
like...
I like the nod. There's, like, a nod in this fanfic that, like, or a couple nods that, like, they might actually be developing these skills in the background.
Well,
like,
the ranger tracks.
At one point, the ranger's like, oh, yeah, something about the tracks. It's like, oh, you know, no one went this way. And Eric's like, how do you know?
He always gets
but Hank just ignores him, and it's like, I guess he gained a class level or whatever.
And also, Sheila, using the cloak, can actually sneak around.
Right.
Like, anybody will tell you if you're being invisible, that doesn't mean you're silent.
That's true. Because you have to move silently.
Truth, yeah.
Just dump all her points and move silently.
But it's weird to me they didn't make anything, like, more explicit than that. Like, just...
Well, speaking of explicit...
the
story takes a sharp, weird turn in the third part, because those first two chapters, it's been really the Eric show.
Yeah.
And now we switch over to Sheila, and it's some rough stuff.
By the way, Sheila is 13.
Sheila's 13?
I looked it up.
Yep.
Actually, maybe 14, because...
We can give her 14. It does not matter.
Towards later, they say they've been there a year, so... But at the start, she's 13.
I don't think that makes a big difference in the content here.
No.
And just before we get into this, sometimes it's a bit rough between chapter transitions, where they just jump into the action from something not related at the end of the other chapter, which I found a little jarring.
Yeah, it definitely went from the Eric show to the Sheila show.
Right.
And unfortunately, I mean, I read the non-R-rated version of this chapter. I pale to think what the R-rated version would have been like.
Well, it's just with
honestly,
explicit sex scene. That's it.
Right, yeah.
That's the R rating.
They don't really leave anything out of this.
Yeah.
It's...
Well, let's talk about the plot around what we're dancing around here first, which is that basically they've gone to a city and it's under siege by Venger's army. Venger has an army now. I don't remember him having an army in the show. Maybe he did once or twice.
Oh.
He doesn't not have an army. He has whatever he needs in like a given episode. But whatever. He's got an army of orcs. They're besieging this city, and like the kids have been helping out the adventuring party, the highly competent adventuring party, who are definitely not just a bunch of kids with random magic items, have been helping out in the defense and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And Sheila has like snuck into the camp or, to spy and gotten captured by Venger.
Went out scouting and and all the other scouts got captured too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the main plot is basically like Venger keeps her under lock and key. Eventually, like she has an escape attempt that doesn't work. He uses her to like as blackmail to like not to prevent the other kids from defending actively the city. It's like, oh, if you raise hands against my army again, I'll kill her. And then eventually he lets her go with bad information that will encourage the surrender of the city so that he can, like, conquer it more quickly.
Those are the broad strokes.
That's the main plot of the chapter. But in the middle of that, you've got what I was definitely not expecting going into this, which is Venger, Sheila, romance.
Maybe.
I know you're gonna say that. The author describes it in terms of a bodice ripper romance novel in their introduction on their own website here. And it's got the DNA of that, through it the whole way. Because there's this whole thing where, they have, like, banter and, like, talking back and forth. But then eventually Venger rapes her. And, like, we're just going to say that straight out.
I feel like this is super weird.
It is.
Because, in the sense that I'm not sure, like, and maybe there's something I missed. Like, I read this absolutely as sexual assault the first time because he's using some sort of magic to persuade her, is what it seems like.
I didn't get that. No.
Like, he touches her and she feels some sort of energy.
I think that's just the bodice ripper, like...
Well, but no, it happens twice, and she specifically talks about it as a magical
I think
sensation.
That was just like a physical sensation, not a...
That's not how I read it.
Anyway, that's fine. And all I'm saying is it was a really confusing to read because it was confusing as to whether she was consenting. And the first time I thought about it, I was like, either he's using magic to manipulate her, she's not consenting, or she is consenting of her own free will. And then I was like, oh, wait, she's 13.
No.
Never mind.
And
there's no element of consent here at all. Yeah.
Right.
And also, I don't know that...
And it's just so weird. It's like, what are you trying to do here?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a difference between the PG-13 and the R-rated version, but there is no consent.
Well, it's like...
Maybe there is.
But it's weird because there's, like, this romance logic where it's like, there is no consent, but... we're not supposed to dwell on that because she's into it. And, like, think about it afterwards. I know that's weird to say. It's just, like, kind of a romance novel kind of logic where, like, that's supposed to be a valid basis for some kind of continuing relationship between them because she was into it. And we're not going to dwell too much on the 13-year-old non-consensual sex scene here, but, like...
I definitely don't... I'm sorry, go on.
I just mean, like... you're definitely supposed to read it from that romance novel bodice ripper perspective rather than from any other perspective, I think.
Which isn't a good perspective.
Right. I'm not saying it's a good perspective.
Yeah, but that is where you're supposed to... Yeah.
I just mean that's the logic by which this fanfic is operating in this relationship.
Yeah.
Quote, logic, unquote. Right.
Yeah, now that I'm readdressing it, it's... even in the PG-13... Wait, maybe I accidentally clicked on the R-rated version. Even in the PG-13 version, there's definitely an element of her, like, fighting it every step of the way.
Yeah, it says
and then giving in. And that is the weirdest part, is it seems like she gives in for some reason, but it's not clear why. I mean, and, it doesn't really matter. The point being is that this is non-consensual.
That's what it is.
Consistently is.
But then we've just got to roll with it for the rest of the fanfic. Because like the next chapter is basically just a little vignette, and it's another sex scene, if you read the R version, of like Sheila sneaking in to steal something useful from Venger. Because, it's the cartoon type thing where they keep running into, like... It's like there's only 6 characters in the world and Venger, right? So like you keep...
Well, it's also the chapter thing where the other chapter ended and it started in media res.
Right.
We don't know why.
But some time has passed.
I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Anyway, but it's like there to establish that like she kind of goes back to him and like they kind of have feelings for each other. And like that's what we're supposed to be going through. And once again, the author would write this differently 20 years later.
No, they probably would. I want to just...
21.
I mean, maybe if I can just like jump ahead a little bit.
Sure.
To not get too bogged down in this element of the plot. It's very frustrating and confusing because it's clear that she does not consent early on, but something persuades her in a way, and it could easily be like any external pressure. But what she does end up confessing to later on is that everyone's like, why did you have sex with him? And she's like, oh, because I'm in love with him. And it's like, first of all, she's a child.
I don't think she says it quite that way, does she?
She does. She absolutely says that later on.
She says, like, maybe? I feel like, I think, I remember that scene being her being like...
She's not explicit later.
Yeah, unable to articulate her reasons even to herself.
It might even be in the next book, but she says something about... I think it's in the next book after a lot of other stuff happens.
Nothing in book 1. About like
Oh, yeah. Okay, maybe that's too far ahead then. I guess my only point is that I remember it specifically because it was very frustrating. She said that she was in love with him, and I think it is in the second book, so maybe I shouldn't speak to it.
Well,
anyway.
no, you can in this context.
In the second book, she explains what happened as I was in love with him, and that was the explanation. And it's especially frustrating because it's like, first of all, you don't really have a relationship, and second of all, it's like loving someone doesn't mean you should just put up with whatever they do. And again, the author would probably write this very differently, but it was a very frustrating idea that because she had some sort of abstract feeling of love for him, which first of all wouldn't make sense because he's their enemy, she did this.
Pretty thoroughly an evil, conquering mage person, yes.
He's like pretty terrible.
Person.
But it almost felt like retconning it into a consensual relationship, even though like this sexual scene was clearly non-consensual, I think, in every iteration.
Oh.
So it was difficult.
If we're transitioning out of that, though, I forgot something from the previous chapter that I liked again in this, like, kind of... Okay, sorry, totally leaving that behind for a completely different thing.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I'm happy with that.
To say.
Just, like, I really like the edging out of the cartoon, like, keeping the cartoon everything, but also making it more serious. It's like, in the cartoon, they never kill a thing, right?
Right.
And usually they're focused focused on escaping things or whatever.
That's a Saturday morning cartoon.
But like it's fair. Like they're kids. It's they're trying to escape. Like they don't have any appetite for murder. Right? But like they're also not Batman. It's not like they sat down and said like I will never take a life. And so there's a scene that's very real in the Design of Darkness, the 3rd chapter where they're defending that city, where Eric's out on the walls and like he's mostly protecting the like other soldiers with his magic shield, like you would, because you're the guy with the magic shield. But someone also forces a sword into his hand and it's just like, look, like stab the orcs while you're doing that.
The commander was saying stab, don't just stand there, stab.
And he's like, I guess I can do that. And he starts stabbing some orcs. He doesn't have because he's in a tough, stressful war situation. It's not that he has a philosophical objection against stabbing an orc. It's just that like...
Also doesn't have any experience with it.
He also doesn't have any experience with it. Yeah. Like, anyway, it's just like a really good... I don't know. Yeah. I just like the smoothness of a lot of those kind of like cartoon to non-cartoon things.
Yeah, fan fiction is interesting because it seems like a majority of the time, if not all the time, the fan fiction itself is a completely different tone than the source material.
I think it's very common.
Very common. Yeah. And like there can be some rough parts transitioning from one to the other. We've talked about some other fan fictions where they struggle with changing the genres, but I think with this one, it didn't feel too out of place or weird to change from the Saturday morning genre to a fantasy genre.
Melodrama? Fantasy. Melodrama's not the right word.
Well, like a fantasy book.
Yeah.
Like actual knights and sword and sorcery and killing people book.
Kind of, with those like soap opera-y overtones that are common to a lot of fantasy, like as we see in the Song of Ice and Fire TV adaptation and stuff.
It makes me muse on the common phrase for fan works as transformative works, like the Organization for Transformative Works, because, you're usually taking something and making it something different. And I feel like, a couple of times when we've read something that's just so in the original genre, we're like, that just felt like another episode of The X-Files.
Yeah.
And we're not sure how to feel about it. It's like...
It's hard to do that tone, but they did it well.
But I mean, I do appreciate pastiche. Whenever I read a fanfic, I'm like, that's perfect. Like, I appreciate it, but it's not the fanfics I remember or love, the ones or enjoy that much. It's like the things that are taking it somewhere different in one way or another.
Yeah.
Transformative. I like that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that's accurate.
Well, then we'll be renaming the podcast Retro Transformative Fiction Retrospective as of the next episode. Now, after those 2 Sheila Venger chapters, which I wasn't expecting to say when I assigned this fan fiction, we're kind of back to the main Eric plot. Those are kind of the two plot lines, right? It's the Sheila Venger thing and it's the Eric thing. And so, and there's other Eric stuff we didn't mention, like someone gave him an amulet that was supposed to be able to take him back home, and he declined it in order to like stay with the group. He didn't want to leave him behind.
There's
or
character growth.
Character growth.
Yeah.
And the character growth ends in a pretty satisfying place in this chapter, Bereft. I kind of liked it. Where like they're at this other like super important temple of the High Lord, because temples, I guess, are useful things. And they're there to get a prophecy from an oracle who's there. And, you know, the other kids are eventually escorted into the presence of the oracle. Eric kind of wanders off and is distracted because there's like these old training grounds underneath the temple for an order of paladins that is no longer in existence.
Yeah, they mentioned that's where the paladins would get christened, and nobody knows how that ceremony worked.
Therefore there's no more paladins around because like there's been no new ones for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And even hearing that, I did not immediately jump to the ending of this fanfic, even though I should have.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of got there when Eric started having doubts at a temple.
Oh, yeah. See, you were more on top of it than me. I was surprised by the ending. And I was like, afterwards, I was like, I should not have been surprised by the ending.
Also, I'm not really coming from a place of a fan of the cartoon. I'm coming from someone who knows Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure.
Being like, a person with a shield at a temple sounds like a paladin to me.
Yeah, for sure. And it is. He ends up like pursuing this little kid down into this like, paladin testing grounds underneath.
Well, into this haunted crypt.
Yeah, which turns out it's infested by skeletons like it is. Yeah, it has to fight some skeletons, including actually hitting them with a weapon and stuff. Maybe they shatter skeletons in the cartoon. I don't quite remember. It doesn't really count as killing a thing.
I have to say, I think the tone of this fanfic must be vastly different from the cartoon, because everything just feels so much more serious and dramatic.
It is.
I
mean, the cartoon tries to be dramatic. It's just that it's dramatic
children's
80s
cartoon.
Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah,
which means
exactly.
probably no or low blood or something.
No blood, definitely. And like they pushed the envelope for 1983 to 1985 a couple of times. Like there's one episode where they seriously debate killing Venger and do not. But like that's not a debate. That's not a debate that He-Man was having, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like let's just kill Skeletor once and for all. No,
they had to fight to put that episode on, I think.
Yeah, that's what the internet tells me.
But the tone of this fanfic is a lot more like Eric dealing with his role as a coward, and then dealing with this becoming a paladin kind of, or a real paladin kind of thing, I suppose.
It's a really natural transition in some ways.
Yeah.
Because like giving him the shield as the coward makes total sense. It's like it's the one that protects you. But giving him the shield, he's turning that shield into like, oh, I'm actively going to use this shield to protect other people. Yeah. And that also makes total sense for a magical shield like that, right? And so, he saves this little girl down the crypt, like finds an exit that only she can fit through. And then he's like, well...
before they find an exit that the girl couldn't get up, but he could.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He turns that one down. He's like, got to find another way up.
I got to find a way that the kid can get out.
Because I'm not leaving her down here even for a moment with skeletons popping up at any time.
Roaming murderous skeletons.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty dramatic. Like, if I can read a little part of it, it's like they're running from the skeletons, and it's like, he didn't stop to see how many more of them would appear, but hitched the little girl closer to his chest and ran like hell. Shit, 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 he chanted silently.
They still keep the Eric flavor, I feel like.
Yeah.
But it's also like, you wouldn't say shit in the cartoon either.
You would not. But
saving his breath
but he would be
running.
thinking it.
Yeah. The girl's weight dragged him, and he could feel a stitch starting in his side, but the clicking of the skeletal footsteps kept following, coming faster now as if the skeletons were running as well, coming louder as if they were gaining on him, and he blindly swerved to the left again as they came to another fork, ran around the next corner, and nearly crashed into the wall that ended the passageway. And it keeps kind of going on in that dramatic fashion. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And, he starts picking up cuts from the skeletons. Once he gets the girl out, he can't get out of that area.
He finds a place, a small opening that a child could get out, and that's through a room filled with an unspecified amount of skeletons.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. She finally let him squeeze her into the crack, which was just barely large enough to hold her, and then he turned and set his back to the wall as the first of the skeletons rounded the corner.
I should say he does not run her through the sword. He runs her through the room and then, shoves her through there, and then he's just in a room full of skeletons.
And then you get a scene where he's fighting for his life against a unkillable amount of skeletons.
Right.
Yeah.
But he also decides, well, I'm not going down without a fight, so he just keeps fighting until eventually he gets like stabbed in the stomach by like a rusty skeleton blade.
There's lots of introspection where it's like where a voice, possibly his, possibly something else's, keeps on asking him like, was it worth it? Would you do this again? And the answer was yes, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's that scene. She made it out because of me. Otherwise, she'd have died alone down here. Like you're going to, the voice pointed out. I'm not going down without a fight, and I'm not going down for nothing. That meant something to him now, he realized. Yeah, right, dying to save somebody else's kid who was stupid enough to come running down here after a ball, and just when you were all about to get home, too. That seems pretty pointless. No, Eric told himself, knocking away an outthrust blade with his own sword before taking off the attacking skeleton's head. I didn't come down here to save a kid, even though that would be worth it, too. I came down here because I stopped being a jerk, and I'm not going to regret that, no matter what happens.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say that's a good example of his character change. It's not a good example of the writing in this, because actually the writing in this can be quite good at times.
Oh, yeah, the writing was amazing.
The writing is very good. Well, that's also Eric's inner voice. I feel like Eric's inner voice is a lot more kind of low language. What's the word? Just like unadorned language.
Low register.
Yeah, that kind of thing. That's not what the writing's normally like. And then he gets stabbed by a skeleton.
And dies.
Yeah. But, then he wakes up and he's like, I thought I was dead. And there's a voice calling him, towards a light.
Basically, he wakes up outside of the locked door that he was supposed to have gone in before, untouched. So I think this whole thing was a vision or a quest or something.
Yeah.
I read it as him being healing magicked because whatever force is about to make him a paladin is like a healing magic.
But also his stuff was fine, too.
Oh, no, so you're right. Your read makes more sense.
No, it was definitely a vision. There's, towards the end of it, it's like, because I guess he has a rich dad, too.
Yeah, back home.
Yeah, back home. And he's had an opportunity to go home and stuff. So that's why he's the coward. He's just kind of like a rich kid. But, like, yeah, he paused at the gate, his hands flat on the wood. He knew he could just walk back to the well, lift the cover, and jump. In a moment, he'd be home with his friends, his family. He could even try to fulfill his vows there.
Well, that's
his paladin vows.
That's much later, right?
Is that much later?
It's the same idea, though.
But it's the same idea, yes.
Yeah.
Well, anyway. Yeah, with his father's millions, there's no telling how much good he could do. He closed his eyes, struggling with temptation. Help me, he thought desperately. Help me to know what's right. And then there's like a scene where he kind of changes his mind. But yeah, you're right. That's a little bit later.
Yeah.
Well, right. You're jumping ahead to they actually find, way back home, the Oracle kind of tells them like, yeah, there's this well of worlds over there that you can go through. And they're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
The bit of information we kind of skipped over in the last chapter was not Venger.
Venger, I think.
Shared the information that this temple was outside of both Venger's and the Dungeon Master's hands, because the Dungeon Master was a bad person. The Dungeon
Master of just stringing them along so they could do random quests for him and never intending to let them get home.
Right, and so they see the Oracle, and the Oracle's like, oh yeah, you can get home, just go there.
And they're like, okay. But yeah, so that's the scene you were just reading, Tori, is when everybody else is going home and Eric has decided to stay because he just took paladin vows to help be a paladin. And yeah, so everybody else gets home. He doesn't, and when they emerge back in the real world, the ride collapses, and there's paramedics and all this kind of stuff, and so
the place burns down or something.
Yeah, the place burns down, so there's no way back. And also, in the most melodramatic plot twist at the end of book 1, Sheila is pregnant.
I'm tired of people using that as a plot thing. I'm pregnant. Stinger credits. Whatever, man.
Yeah, it's literally I'm pregnant. End of book 1 of the Trial by Existence. Yep. This is what I was gonna. I don't want to linger too much on this, but it's like we talked about how there was sexual assault, and there's this weird thing in book 2 where it's described as like her loving Venger. I keep wanting to say Venger, but the author also trying to make him into kind of a good guy so that it's not as bad, but it's like no, it's still bad because she's like 12 or 13 or 14.
Also, he's still terrible.
He's still a terrible person too. They don't do really much to change that. And I do think that using pregnancy as a plot device like this, I'm going to assume this author is probably not a woman. I'm not sure.
Oh, I think the author is, but I think the author was a 21-year younger woman at the time that they wrote this. I mean, I don't know much about them, but
maybe
like,
not.
that's my
I mean,
understanding.
maybe. Oh, yeah. Well, because, actually, the author's name is Lady something, isn't it?
I think so.
Okay.
I kind of came to the same idea as you.
I was confused by it because of the way both sexual assault and pregnancy are used as plot devices. And I think anyone who has personal experience with either of those things probably wouldn't use them as plot devices, in my opinion.
Yeah, she, her. Author identifies as a woman.
Cool.
I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, it's good to know. And again, this is a long time ago the author wrote this. I'm not trying to come down too hard. I just feel like it is rough to see those as devices rather than, real hard experiences.
If we're back to that relationship, what doesn't help is that neither Sheila nor Venger really have a whole lot of personality anyway. I mean, Venger does more because he's the evil villain. But, like, it feels like Sheila's kind of a blank slate to begin with. So it's hard even to take this as, like, with this character personally, it like follows logically from the character. Because, like, she didn't have much of a character.
And, like, every other terrible thing aside, they had no relationship. There was no reason for this to happen.
Right.
And they didn't develop one afterwards. They were just all of a sudden in lust, love, whatever. For no reason.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is I don't necessarily think that she... Like, I agree with you, Dom. And I disagree with you, Amado. I don't necessarily think that she's a blank slate, that she doesn't have a personality. I'm
thinking more from the perspective of the cartoon. I mean, she has a role in the
story.
In the story.
Yeah.
I just think, what... most of her concern, especially going to the second book when she is pregnant, is all about her relationship and her child rather than her having an identity of her own. I feel like her identity might have been strong when she first shows up in this story, but as soon as stuff happens to her and her body and sex and sexuality and pregnancy happens to her,
she's more of a
she becomes different. She becomes more of a vehicle than a human.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair description. But moving onward, that's into book 1. Book 2 is only 3 chapters. And the first one stands alone. And I mean, it's pretty cool. It's just kind of a chapter of Eric being a paladin. And
was that book 2?
Yeah,
I didn't realize that
was the first one in book 2. Yeah, the cutoff was the time skip.
Okay, so I read them all then.
Yeah, you read it all. And so, there's a chapter of him being a paladin, and he, like, relieves a besieged, like, other city, because Venger's army is, like, moving across the continent.
I love that story. That was a great kind of story.
It was really good.
Yeah.
And, like, part of the fun of it is the, like, kind of Star Wars thing, where it's, like, there were no more Jedi, and, like, now there's a Jedi. It's like, there wasn't a paladin, and now there's a paladin, but everyone knows what a paladin is.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the cool part, right?
Oh, you're right. Yeah,
it's like
it's kind of Jedi, isn't it?
It's kind of Star Wars, and so like the idea that a paladin shows up is in itself really, really hopeful.
This warrior showing up is like, I'm a paladin. Like, no, you're not.
It's like, it's a cool story. I feel like I don't know what to talk about it specifically, but like also Venger comes in. He's like, I thought I felt the weapons of power. I felt the weapons of power leave the realm. And it's like, oh, whatever. It's just that kid with the shield. But then also he's like the kid with the shield who's a paladin.
Right.
And like he manages to like, beat Venger through like this unexpected power. And I've got to say also, we're not on Dungeons and Dragons the game logic. He's not a first level paladin who can like cure 2 hit points of damage. He's like, he got a set of cool powers.
Well, I think he is the paladin.
Right.
That's his title now.
It's an important title. Yeah.
What I mean is just like being a paladin comes with a bunch of cool stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like he's a crappy paladin.
He's not a game paladin. He's a literary paladin who's physical embodiment of their god on the planet.
Though the chapter does end with him getting a paladin horse that just like shows up.
Yeah.
Like paladin horses do.
Well, it's cool because like it sets this whole wandering warrior story up, which I'm a sucker for. I love Yojimbo and Sanrio.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And this makes sense for a wandering warrior because like this chapter and the chapters before, Eric makes decisions entirely by feeling, which is the I guess communing with their god or something. So they just like say, okay, it's time to go, and they move on to do something else now, and like they arrive someplace and I'm supposed to help here, and like it makes sense to move from place to place and help people along the way.
And I also like that despite being full of faith, being like a warrior of hope, trying to save people, he still pretty much talks the same way.
Yeah.
And so like,
I know, I was gonna say
it's
that
really
too.
nice.
Yeah.
There's a scene where like this acquaintance of theirs who was in one episode and maybe had an action figure, Strongheart. Like he's under a fear spell that obviously Eric's immune to because he's a paladin.
Right.
And, drawing a shuddering breath, the knight seemed to look at him again. You do not feel it? The fear? And, he's a fantasy knight. Eric shook his head, but he understood now. Crap. Look, it's Venger's magic, he said urgently. It's not real.
He's like, yeah, he's a paladin, but he doesn't talk all high and mighty all of a sudden for no reason.
No, he rarely does. It's really charming. I like this paladin guy.
Yeah, he's gone through a lot of character change because you really don't like him early on because he's, the rich kid coward. But, I love that the connection is that his dialect is still the same. His way of speaking is still the same. Because you see that it's still the same person.
And also, it's not like he's not pessimistic by attitude. It's just he knows how to deal with it now.
Yeah.
And sometimes he gets these nudges like you would of look, we really need to go defend that hill. Or the best idea here is definitely to charge out of the gates.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing.
And waste no time trying to explain it either.
Right.
And I fully appreciate that you can still see him as the same kid, but just doing better now and filling a different role.
Because in D&D literature, clerics and paladins and stuff have been really boring.
Yeah.
A lot of people try to play paladins, and they don't characterize it well at all. It's boring. It's just oh my god, holy blah blah blah. But this is a transformation. This is a born again paladin, and you're really with them from the beginning to the end, all the way through it.
Yeah, you see a real backstory for this character, as opposed to if you created a D&D paladin and you were a really boring person with a really boring character design, you'd be like, yes, my character has always been holy. They had a difficult childhood, but they chose the path of the righteous, and therefore they are now righteous and speak like this. And Eric's not like that, and that's kind of chill. It's paladins is real people too.
So I like the convert paladin.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then there's just kind of one more kind of mini story arc for the last 2 chapters. And it starts off back in the real world.
Mini or...
It's not...
It's short, but it's...
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on, but we're not gonna get into it too granularly. Back in the real world, Sheila's had her child, who is a magic child, super baby.
And his name is Keith.
Keith the baby.
Keith the baby.
Keith the fireball juggling baby.
And
And
he was born in the 80s. Keith is... maybe an okay name for a child born in the 80s.
Should be Kyle, I think, maybe.
I honestly, but whatever.
And we don't see a whole lot of their life back there, which is fine because they don't have enough. You would have to really flesh them out to make it super interesting.
Especially since they're contrasting this with Paladin Yojimbo.
Right, exactly. And so there's a few nice touches, like the fact that Bobby, who was youngest for the whole experience, seems to have adjusted best coming back. And in fact, in a moment, Sheila decides, I need to get this baby back to a world where he's not going to be, dissected because he's magical or whatever.
Gotta go back, Marty.
Yeah. Gotta go back. Something's got to be done about my kid.
It started with her being really scared because she was still pregnant.
Oh, yeah, about what the baby's going to be
baby's
or
gonna
look like.
look
Because Venger's a
and then
weirdo
he was,
looking.
he's super weird looking. Even though
he's got a horn. Just one horn, not two.
One horn, one side of his horn that...
She makes a good argument that his sister looks...
more human.
Looks totally, pretty much human.
Does she also have a horn?
Yeah. I don't think so, no.
Could be wrong.
I
guess
think
not.
she pretty much looks human.
She's a one-shot character, though.
Anyway.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I looked her up just to know who they were talking about. But, Keith ends up looking fine. He's just magical.
On his dad's side.
Yeah.
and
I think.
The avenue they decide to do, they do a little bit of Call of Cthulhu, breaking out from D&D and following up on some leads, which is they decide to find the person who designed the ride. And I was like, why do you think the ride itself was important? But I'd forgotten that on the inside of the ride, there's pictures of Fantasy World, and they did not forget that.
They mentioned that.
They were like, that was the reason. They were like, look, someone painted paintings of the realm, which is this fantasy world.
You're right, that's completely called Cthulhu, isn't it? I saw these visions.
And it's multiple steps, too,
they
to follow
go
up
and
on
they
it.
track him down.
Well, Eric, and to get that, Eric ends up going to... Not Eric. Hank Hank goes to Eric's dad, who's rich.
Who's sued the shit out of everybody.
Who is suing, right, who has been suing the
because as far as they know,
of it.
Eric is dead.
It's also like, there's also like a brief moment where they're like, we're sorry that Eric's like presumably dead or whatever. And he's just like, I don't care as long as I get my money. And you're like, oh, well, that.
He's just supposed to be a asshole, inexpressive, like rich dad. I'm sure there's some feelings happening.
Focusing more on financially punishing the other people than. Yeah,
but they did a good job kind of like doing a little backstory on Eric and why he's got his
and it's a totally reasonable connection for them to be able to track down the name of this person because he's like, they have like this dossier. He gives Hank a like whole folder of copies of like all the information related to this lawsuit, and it's buried in there. Yeah. Like because it's all about like the faulty construction of the ride, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, and so they track down this person who it turns out is like originally from the realm and was trying to kind of set up a magical situation to get back.
They had a bum deal with the summoned demon, so they wanted to go someplace that had less magic, and they went there and realized that this place had no magic, and they were stuck.
Got a whole little backstory. Yeah. So they were setting up this thing to try to kind of do magic, but couldn't actually do the magic. And it's an interesting way to justify it. They were like, no, someone definitely pulled you through from the other side because like you can't do magic from here.
Right.
But it makes sense that you would have been pulled through there because it would have been easier there because of the way I set up the ride.
Totems, because that was that person's last ditch attempt to get back to the realm.
Right. And
so it's filled with every possible painting and totem and spell they could do there, but it just couldn't activate it.
Right, and so that's the justification. Amusingly enough, he's also like, I mean, I had this thing that would take me back, but it doesn't work because no magic.
There's no magic.
And they just hand it to the baby, and like it turns on, and it's like,
They also said that it was the dungeon master that pulled them in.
Right. Well, which makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess dungeon master.
I mean, they seem to be able to do anything.
Well, also, there's like no one else in the world like who is important
or who cared about them.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could have said, the High Lord or whatever, but.
It's not clear why, according to this story, Dungeon Master actually does care about them. Oh, well, because in the first story, there's an implication that Dungeon Master only pulled them into the world to defeat Venger.
Well, they kind of blotted away as like, the Dungeon Master's going to use them to do stuff that the Dungeon Master couldn't get their hands on directly.
Yeah, so that's when we first started to suspect that he's not just like a nice dude.
Use the weapons of light to like deter Venger from something else.
But we get this implication that he's like manipulated these kids into doing his good work.
Kids because weapons worked better depending on how innocent the people using them were.
Yeah.
You know, it just occurred to me. It was necessary for Eric to go through the portal last, so he'd be like, I'm not going. Bye, Hank. Like, close the portal behind them.
Yeah.
But it's a shame that they didn't, talk about it beforehand, because he could have been an invisible pole vaulting paladin with a bow that fires, lightning arrows and a earthquake club and
see, we're talking about that cartoon, not actual D&D here, Amado.
That's what the actual D&D group would have done.
Dump all their items in one person.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a really excellent point.
He would have a dumb magic hat on his head, but it wouldn't matter because you couldn't see him.
I mean, that's you're like, why not? Like, it's not like they, really missed opportunity.
Well, no, it makes sense in the context because he wasn't telling them that he was planning on staying behind.
And also, they'd probably say
but
the items were soul-bound or something.
Yeah, something like that. It's like, are you a...
Well, where did the items actually go?
They took them with them.
But they don't work in the human world. Oh, I mean, I guess some of the human world.
But they still took them with them. Like, Venger senses them disappear. And in the moment, they go through this portal back to the realm. And, to summarize... They show up in the middle of a battle between, Eric and his allies and Venger and his army, and it's all intense. And in the middle of this war that's not going too well, Eric gets one of those god hunches, and it's like, let's go defend that hill right over there. Yeah. And the war chief he's fighting alongside is like, yeah, okay, you're the paladin. And they do.
I mean, that's a terrible position to be at, and we'll take some losses, but I guess we'll go.
Yeah, and they go, and four older teenagers bust out of the portal to save the day.
Yeah, they leave Bobby behind.
Yeah, they leave Bobby doesn't come. That's fine.
Yeah.
They should have taken his club, though, honestly.
Yeah. By the way, I feel like this is a good point to mention that every single chapter has been preceded by a Robert Frost poem.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're all named after Robert Frost poems.
And they have the title of the poem.
I ignored them.
Which, when maybe 7 or 8 years ago in my life, I would have been super critical of. Mm-hmm. I definitely went through a Robert Frost hate phase. But the last chapter
I don't think I got those in my version.
Oh, really? It's the Fire and Ice poem. It's Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold those who favor fire. But if I had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. So that is the one Robert Frost poem where I'm like, that one's all right, you know? I don't like the part where it's like it's also great. I think like they could have another line for and it would suffice. But that's absolutely the perfect poem to do the ending with, you know?
In my head,
I really liked it that they used that one.
In my head, that second to last line was, ice is also nice and would suffice. Would you prefer that, Tori?
No, because that doesn't fit the rhyme scheme.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
Anyways, they do a whole labored plot thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of info dumping about the plot. And what's relevant? What's relevant is there's this demon that Venger... Well, okay, yeah. Venger's inheriting the Dungeon Master power. It's like he's the son of Dungeon Master, which is kind of like...
So yeah, they kind of dumped this whole Dungeon Master Venger plot that they kind of talked about once or twice, and then they just ran through it quickly here.
He's
a lot of stuff going on.
There's a lot of stuff going on. But Dungeon Master pulled a Last Jedi Luke Skywalker.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
But many, many years earlier. And kind of caused a bunch of shit to go down. And Venger to swear vengeance and swear his soul to a demon. And the demon wants to kill the newly arrived baby so that Venger will be next in line to inherit the Dungeon Master power. Because the demon wants Venger to, like, be in his pocket and also have the Dungeon Master power.
Wants Venger to have the power.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's why they killed the baby.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Venger is Dungeon Master's son.
Yes. How this interacts with Venger's sister, we don't know.
I don't know.
We don't care. Whatever.
And also, their mom was a dragon.
Their mom was a dragon.
No,
Tiamat.
Tiamat's the aunt.
It's only implied that their mom was a dragon.
Never mind.
Apparently, and a sibling of Tiamat.
But they say Tiamat was their aunt. But I thought that might be like, you know, like loosely an aunt. You know, like a friend of the family type of aunt. I wasn't sure if there was actually a dragon
Venger turn
relationship.
into a platinum dragon?
He does.
So I mean, his other parent is Bahamut.
All right,
it has to have been Bahamut.
Oh, the platinum one?
Right.
The platinum one, opposite Tiamat.
Right.
Good point.
I mean, I don't accept anything else because it, like, my nerd mind wants to fit everything into those slots.
But they mention multiple times, like, how his sister, I forget her name, like, didn't look different than a human. Like, do they have different parents? They have different...
They express their dragonness in different...
Venger looks different from a human.
Venger was also had their powers sealed by Dungeon Master, so who knows how that fucked with that.
Confusing.
Whatever.
So basically, they give Venger the option either renounce evil and your powers or let the baby die. And so Venger renounces the powers, but the column's still coming out.
Because apparently he loves Sheila and the baby.
What the fuck ever. And then they say, like, Venger's not strong enough without the powers, and like, they said Dungeon Master, it would be if you unsealed him. It's like, no, I sealed him because he's evil. It's like, but no, he's evil because you sealed him. He's like, oh, I'm a dumbass.
Yeah.
So then they decide everything's okay. And so they unseal Venger. He turns into a platinum dragon.
I feel like it's not a bad setup that we're like glancing over of the plot. It's just that it's all info dumped like at the same time.
It's all
like this last chapter is like it's everything in the last chapter. And
I mean,
like,
some of the things were hinted at before, but like not most of it. Like the fact that Venger specifically has a grudge against Dungeon Master and all he's doing is like to try to get a Dungeon Master. Like that's been established.
Like, they could have dropped stuff like this before, where Venger talked about relation with Dungeon Master, and when they're at the Oracle, they could have talked about other Oracle prophecies that happened before and the results of that. And
no, it's not well done plot stuff. I just mean like the ideas are fine. It's just kind of not delivered in a very good way.
Well, and I also feel like there's a lot of effort here to make Venger a sympathetic character, but it's not followed through on at all.
Like they
like it's just like Venger like has like does certain things that are okay. But it doesn't make him what I think the author wants to make him to be.
Well, it's like they have parts where they try to make Venger, try to redeem Venger, but they scatter it throughout the stories. And also scattered throughout the stories, Venger killing mass groups of people indiscriminately.
Right, yeah. Like, it doesn't work out. Like, I do feel like the author wants us to think that he has a redemption arc, but I don't see the redemption arc.
But like, even if you are redeemed, you are still a war criminal.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that, like, I feel like the author wants us to, like, because Sheila loves him and believes in him. I feel like the author wants us to, like, I don't think the author's trying to say that we shouldn't trust Sheila's perspective.
The author is not trying to say that. We don't trust it.
Yeah.
But that's what the author's trying to say.
But that's my point, is it's like, she seems to love him. And as the reader, it's like, I get the impression we're supposed to believe in her love for him, but there's nothing that shows us that he's good in any way at all.
Other than in regards to her personally, maybe.
Other than unwilling...
Yeah, he cares about her and his own child.
Yeah.
That's not...
Not willing to kill your own child. It's like, that's
low bar.
Nothing. Yeah, exactly.
Anyways,
and he already hurt her in multiple ways. He sexually assaulted her, so, like, there's nothing... Anyway, moving on.
So they do that and they win the day.
Yeah, they drive away the demon, even without the power of earthquakes. And Tiamat shows up to be the cavalry. And like I said, that's the only appearance of Tiamat. I want more Tiamat. Tiamat is like a cool design.
Tiamat didn't do, like, I mean, Tiamat did a great deal of things, but didn't, like, have much of a presence. So.
Tiamat did one thing, which was attack the demon at the last moment as the cavalry.
Exactly. But then, like, dipped.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I think the other thing Tiamat did was be mentioned some point before that.
No, probably.
That was it.
Maybe.
And then in the epilogue, like, Sheila and Venger go off on, like, some sort of nuptial road trip or something.
Right. That was the other part where I was like, we're supposed to believe they like each other? Okay.
They've never had a relationship. They've boned twice.
They've had a terrible... Like,
look, we're old and bitter. We're all, like, 30 years old, you know. We don't believe in love. Can you find it in your heart just for a moment to believe in love?
Not this, no.
This is not love.
Not here.
I think you're not believing hard enough, Tori.
We draw the line
So,
here,
like,
no further.
how old is he?
15.
Okay.
Oh, shit.
Half your age plus 7.
Oh, God.
No, actually, she would be older than him at this point then. Anyway, and then in an odd Rowling postscript move, everybody else sticks around in the realm and hooks up with their vague romantic interests from one-shot episodes.
I was thinking it was an end of a college movie or something where they show freeze frames and they have the little paragraph of what they did afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is like that.
And
but I just mean the fact that, like, everybody was hooked up with whoever was even vaguely plausible as the romantic interest from the show.
Yeah, it was a lazier fan fiction finish everything off.
Right. Just wrap a neat bow on it.
Yeah.
Sheila O'Brien did indeed marry Lord Venger. By his power, her parents and brother were brought to the realm for a short time that they might attend her wedding. It is said that for love of her, he turned wholly from darkness and served the realm faithfully as dungeon master, freeing all those whom he had enslaved and returning the lands he had conquered to the dominion of their own lords. Blah, 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 blah. Point being, no evidence that he would ever, like, change this way.
You mean until that postscript?
Well, there's no evidence. Like, they say it, but there's no evidence.
Not really.
Like, it doesn't make sense.
It's like, whatever their relationship was, there was no change in Venger's behavior to
Except
the populace or the world or how to govern or manage anything.
Mm-hmm.
Apropos of nothing, I can't hear the word holy anymore without, like, my mind kind of skipping a beat, because when Serena and I were reading through, like, the works of Lovecraft, like, that was kind of our drinking game word. Like, every time he says holy.
I love that. That's beautiful.
So we're about ready to close this out, but before that, we say what we did not like or what we liked most about the fanfic, in that order, so we can end on a positive note. For what we don't like, I think I can
we talk
guess
as a
what you're going to
chorus
say.
here?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we're all going to complain about the whole Sheila Venger entire plotline, right?
Yes.
I think I am less dismayed by the, like, you know, quote, problematic content, unquote, than you two are. And what bothers me more is that, like, I'm willing to accept the, like, you know, bodice ripper romance novelness of the whole setup. The problem is it's just not well written. It's not convincing. It feels forced and empty.
Yeah, I think as a synergy between the two thoughts, like, it's terrible and also it wasn't done well.
Yeah, well, it's both.
Yeah.
It's true. It's just kind of a matter of, like, what dismays you more.
Right. Well, it is pretty difficult for multiple reasons. Like, as I think I mentioned before, it's like, I thought about this in a context of, like, oh, at first she was reluctant because this was an enemy, and later, like, realized that she actually was attracted and did consent. Then I went back through and I was like, no, I actually don't think that's how it plays out. There's too much pressure from her circumstance. However, like, all of that is completely, it doesn't matter because she's underage and she's so young. And I think that's maybe the biggest mistake the author made. Like, there's lots of elements where consent cannot be realized in this situation, but, like, for the author to even touch on a situation in which Venger, who I assume is an adult, could have a sexual relationship with someone who's 13 or 14 years old. It's just not something
Venger's an adult. You don't have to, like,
yeah,
quibble.
well, I mean, I don't know. I haven't... Anyway,
He's
point being, is it should never have happened. And I'm sure the author now,
well, yeah, but
as a grown
that's,
person, will recognize that.
well, sure, but that's also,
But
that's, I'm not gonna say that's okay. I'm saying, like, it's okay to write about stuff that shouldn't have happened if you're writing about it well, or, like, in an engaging way, right?
No, I don't know.
You don't think anyone
No.
should write anything that, like, would be, you know... I feel like this is a huge debate that was happening on Twitter in the fanfiction community again recently, of, like, you know, people getting upset about people writing stories that, you know, have immoral...
Yeah, I mean, romanticizing sexual assault is a huge problem for me. And I mean, you know, that's my opinion, but I think it's not only triggering, but it's problematic. And again, I think the author might think differently about it now. I'm not saying that we haven't, you know, all at times in our lives not understood exactly how problematic the things that we thought and wanted to write about were.
I think part of the issue with, like, writing about something that is objectionable is, like, we aren't upset about talking about the murder in here. Like,
That's
it's done by both sides. Where, like, the heroes murder somebody with swords in a fight, but that is not as objectionable because it's not as sadly plausible in modern circumstances in our day-to-day lives. Something that could and does and has happened is more personal and more emotional and calling upon more things from the reader than something else that is objectionable that happens that isn't.
That's true.
You're not going to be in full armor fighting an orc anytime soon, you know? But you could be in a terrible situation.
I mean, I am avoiding amusement parks just in case.
Is that why?
I just also think that, yeah, there's certain things that, you know, in terms of, there's a very, like, how do I put this? Trauma that can be triggered from, you know, experience of sexual assault in terms of reading text is just a lot more prevalent than, I mean, death can be a very triggering thing in media and also, you know, violence, killing, but it's the way it's done. And yeah, this is fantasy violence. Like, they even trigger warn, like, they put fantasy violence as a different thing than like actual violence in, you know, TV ratings.
Yes, and
because, you know,
differentiation there,
right, because violence is a part of existing as a human in a certain way, but, like, it's like, yeah, we're fighting with swords and that's action mostly. This is different and involves an element of emotional manipulation. But yeah, you know, not to get too far into that, I also agree that there's an element of those scenes where they aren't even that well written either, like you were saying, Amado. Like, well, it seems minor to me because the bigger issue is, of course, the content, but it's like,
even from
why
a technical
even
standpoint.
include them?
I think the romanticization, that was the term that you said that's key here, about, you know, why we don't like it. But we may as well spin over to things that we did like. And I feel like this fanfic's really kind of split in two in my head, because I thought the whole Eric plot, which is half of the, you know, series, was done really well. And consistently done well.
I love that story. Like, Eric's story was a great story.
It's like, I would read several more fantasy books in that series by this author about Eric the Paladin, you know, in this fantasy world.
I like the Eric story. And actually, you know, in terms of Sheila, I liked it when she was talking about her child and, like, trying to figure out what was going on with her kid. I just didn't like that it was, you know, when she went back and talked to Venger again, then she stopped being as much of a character. There are moments of characterization that were really strong. And also the writing in this is sometimes really beautiful. The author's vocabulary is awesome.
I'm not sure we talked about that during the podcast, but
it came up, but we didn't dwell on it.
Yeah. It is really great.
And that makes me a little curious because, you know, the conceit of this show being retro fanfic retrospective, we're choosing something here really early in the fanfiction writing career of someone who has been writing fanfiction for 4 years.
Makes me really curious what the current content is.
I was going to say, well, current content and current writing. It makes me like kind of curious about her as an author.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can object to some of the content, but the flow is great. The word choice is spectacular.
The flow's not always great. Like we have run into things like the info dump, like the
jump between chapters.
The jumps between chapters are sometimes actually genuinely hard to follow.
That's a good point. But I do think the only info dump was really at the end when it felt like the author was just like rushed for time.
They had some minor ones. Venger explained to Sheila about the dungeon master.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good point. But I think, like, in general, when it's just paragraph to paragraph, like, the pacing... I guess pacing is a better word. The pacing's usually pretty good.
A lot of the technical stuff, I feel like, could have been fixed or addressed with an editor or an outside...
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
And there's some great turns of phrase, like, really spectacular ones. You can see how the author was probably inspired by Robert Frost in terms of how they write. Because his poems... Despite my on and off relationship with Robert Frost, a lot of his poems are very short, but the word choice is very precise, but also a little, like, it's elegant in the same way. And the author has a similar tone to their writing.
Oh, also, there's a whole bunch of throwaway minor characters in this, but they don't feel like that at the time when they're in the story. They all feel like good enough characters and add to the story.
Yeah, they're all there for very specific story reasons.
Yeah,
which is good. Like in that early D&D plot in that town, like a few characters are introduced, but it's like 3. You can keep track of them.
It's like it's not overbearing, but they have a little bit of a personality, but not enough to distract. But
there's several guest star like rulers or warriors that like the party or Eric are kind of like allied with,
or even
like they're all fine.
Like the monk that shows them around the temple.
That's true. Or the high priest. Yeah, you talked about.
Yeah.
The cameo of like the Oracle, they're all distinct. I mean, not distinct in my mind, but like when they're in the scene, like you said, they don't muddy the waters.
I'm not sure I can describe it. Just they all left with a good impression.
Right.
Even though I don't think they had that much of an impression at all in the story, but it was good, whatever it was.
Yeah, they all contribute.
Yeah, they all contribute. It didn't feel crowded either.
Yeah. Any other praise before we sign off?
No, I think I praised the writing pretty well, and the story was also engaging.
It had its ups and downs.
Yes. I just, I think it's actually most frustrating to me, the, like, elements of coercion and assault in it, because they pull you out of the story when you see them, and I think if you could be... For me as a reader, be fully immersed in the story, it would be very engaging.
I think if you rewrote those sections, it could be all right.
Yeah.
It would take some rewriting, though, to make it.
It would take some pretty serious
rewriting. But you'd have to do something different.
But it's not like it's a teardown, It's a remodel.
Agreed.
Well, I think we're going to close it there. Next week, we're going to try to do something very strange and, for the first time in a proper episode, discuss a fan game. This one, part of the reason the Utena episodes we've done, Tori, are special episodes is because they're too recent. They're 2009.
Yeah, of course.
But this one is properly retro. We are going to play King's Quest ZZT and then come back and talk about it, which is a fan King's Quest sequel for the game ZZT, which had a world editor. ZZT produced by Tim Sweeney, later of Epic, then of Epic Games, Epic Mega Games at the time, but like later involved in like the Unreal Engine and big deals like that. But this was like an early venture, and ZZT was a big deal to me as a kid, and I look forward to talking about it. And also King's Quest. Both those things.
Cool.
I'll try to provide a link to King's Quest ZZT, the downloadable ZZT world, at let's do bit.ly/RFR King. Just King. As for this was episode 69 of Retro Fanfic Retrospective, The Trial by Existence by famed and, I forgot to mention, Archive of Our Own won a Hugo Award last year.
Oh.
Yeah, for best fan-related work.
Okay.
So, astolat, this is a, technically speaking, kind of shared Hugo winning author that we just read. Just not for being an author. The Hugo.
All right, there we go.
Okay.
An author who won a Hugo. Anyway, what was I saying? Trial by Existence by Astolat, written like 1998, 1999. It's not completely clear which one. You can find a link to the copy on the author's website that has the PG-13 versions at bit.ly/RFR trial. TRIAL. Not, what would trail? TRAIL would be trail.
Yes, trial, not trial.
We'll save that for our first Mark Trail fanfic.
Yeah.
As soon as I can track one down.
It's the link that's taken. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. The intro song to the podcast is The Weekly Fair off of the album Popey's Incredible Adventure by Komiku. The outro song is Run Against the Universe from the same album. You can find this album and other works by Komiku at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. You can find our website at retrofanficretrospective.podbean.com or bit.ly/retrofanfic. And if you have questions, comments, or thoughts about the episode or the show, please contact us on Twitter at retrofanfic. Send us an email at retrofanficretrospective@gmail.com. You can contact us on I said Twitter.
Yeah.
What else we got? Reddit at Fanfic Retrospective. Facebook at Retrofanfic. And you can also leave comments, reviews on whatever you're using to listen to our show.
And I just want to emphasize that Twitter, again, if you're interested in fanfic and fanfiction-related content, Amado updates that every so often with fanfiction news and thoughts.
I do retweet some fanfiction things. Only the freshest of fanfic posts related to old fanfiction.
That is us.
Yep.
I'm Amado.
I'm Tori.
I'm dumb.
We're just three Earth life forms trying to be nice to each other until we find our way home. Until next time, take care.
I think that episode was a critical hit. Eh?
Yeah.
I'll see myself out.
Better roll to confirm. We are doing the D&D one.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
Satan's Game.
I had this moment where I was just like, I hope that's the fanfic we're doing tonight.
I didn't realize that Dead Alewives was Dan Harmon.
Who?
Never mind.
Wait.
Rick and Morty guy, Scrubs guy, Community guy.
Don't really. Oh, Community.
Heat, Laser, and Jack, or whatever that cartoon was.
Nope.
Heat, Bike, and Jack.
Nope.
That's okay. We can still be friends, even though we're polar opposites.
On this issue.
No, that just means we're opposites.